It felt like the worst possible thing that a chair of a beloved children's charity could feel, where you see that your charity is funding a place that harboured a people. Oh, this is potential existential ruin for BBC Children in Need. I read something very worrying about a trans charity in Scotland called LGBT Youth Scotland, and I thought, I wonder if we fund. So I rang up the chief executive immediately. Do we fund this charity? I don't know. They were too frightened. They were cowardly. Oh, well, no, we can't stop this funding. This is an executive of BBC Children in Need saying that about a boy who was raped.
You'd become the story.
Yeah. It promoted things like breast binding, puberty blockers were okay, take contraception with you because some lesbians might have a penis. It's just absolute bad. And I just said, no, we have to stand up. We have to stand up for children. We are called BBC Children in Need. The BBC didn't have the courage to say, we are stopping this funding, even though they knew it was wrong. And they said,
61% of regular Heretics viewers haven't subscribed yet. Can I ask you a favour? If you love these fearless conversations, hit subscribe now because it's free, takes 2 seconds and powers our mission. Rosie Millard, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You stepped down. We're going to go straight into it as the chair or the head. What is
Chair.
it? The chair of the charity BBC Children in Need.
Yeah.
Why?
I discovered that BBC Children in Need is essentially a grant-giving agency. It funds about 1,500 grassroots charities across the entire UK, helping children, providing money for children to have counsellors, providing money for swings in playgrounds, providing money for day trips for young carers, etc., etc. And we're meant to know, the executive is meant to know where all the money is going. I read something very worrying about a trans charity in Scotland called LGBT Youth Scotland, and I thought, I wonder if we fund LGBT Youth Scotland. So I rang up the chief executive immediately and I said, do we fund this charity? He said, I don't know, which is not a great answer from a chief executive. You expect them to know where the money's going. And he then said, let me find out. Obviously, if this involves any harm to any children, we wouldn't touch this charity with a barge pole, sort of thing. In the interim, I did a quick and easy scope of this charity and found out, to my horror, it was like the worst thing you could imagine if you're in charge of a children's charity. It was founded by a convicted paedophile who was imprisoned for abusing a baby, if you can imagine such a thing. It then had historic cases of child sexual abuse, which had not actually been cleared. And then recently it had employed another convicted paedophile who had written material for the charity. So I immediately called an emergency board meeting and I said, we have to stop the funding of this straight away. And 6 months later, that hadn't happened and the whole charity dragged its feet. There were two issues really with LGBT Youth Scotland. One, the legacy of being founded by somebody who was guilty of the most dreadful, shocking and ghastly crime against children and had a casual kind of association with abuse of children. And secondly, because the work it was doing in primary schools, this charity, LGBT Youth Scotland, its official status is it's meant to deal with children aged 13 to 25, which is weird in itself. I mean, if you're going to have a youth club, having that breadth of age sends alarm bells ringing to me.
Well, it usually be sort of 11 to 18 or 16 or something.
Yeah, or like any child group, you would normally expect it to be within some sort of like 2 or 3 year parameter, like the Scouts,
right.
or like children 13 to 15, or young people 18 to 21, or something like this. But this charity was actually working across Scotland in primary schools. It had 40 primary schools signed up to a charter which effectively promoted transgender policies and trans concepts to small children who were learning to read. And it promoted things like breast binding. It said that puberty blockers were okay. It suggested that small children should be going to use the bathroom in gender-neutral toilets. There should be gender-neutral dormitories on school trips. That if a boy wanted to be in a girls' team at school, that would be okay. Imagine if you're a little girl and you're a bit worried about something, or you're slightly older and you're prepubescent and you're concerned about your developing body, and some boy who's just decided they've defined themselves as a girl comes in and starts using the loos or overnight stays, and also it said if your child wants to, primary school signed up to this. If if a small child wants to define as the opposite gender, the opposite sex, he or she ought to be allowed to do that, and the parents shouldn't be told. What is this madness? This is not something that children should be aware of. Now, I've been a journalist for 35 years, and I really do know a story when I see one, and I could see immediately that the Association of BBC Children Need funding, a charity which had been founded by and employed paedophiles and was promoting what I would call unhelpful and unnecessary transgender policies in primary schools. I could see that would be of enormous reputational damage.
You'd become the story.
Yeah.
If somebody had sort of scooped that.
Exactly. And no one knew about it, even though it was on the Wikipedia page of LGBT Youth Scotland. In fact, it still is, even though BBC Children Need no longer funds it. So I thought, well, look, if I was effectively the whistleblower. So I thought, well, if I draw attention to it now, we stop funding now, we have saved ourselves an enormous amount of damaging publicity.
Absolutely. I suppose that it's such a complex this whole thing, because obviously I think obviously 99.999% of people would say this charity that was involved in those ghastly things with children, assaults on children, that's awful. But then a lot of people, particularly in our media, the media you and I work in, would be hearing that second part that you said about the gender stuff and all of those things in schools and boys and girls teams, and they'd be going, what's the problem? Has that been something you've been running up against, like maybe behind closed doors for years?
Well, I think it was a problem, but actually, I think now the tide has turned. Yeah. And since the Supreme Court ruling that biological sex is immutable, I think actually, people have sort of woken up to years of madness. I mean, I think there are some areas, and young people, strangely, I mean, my daughters, I can't really talk to them about this because they think that, it's not a question of being kind of nasty to trans people. Adult people, you can do what you want. You can wear what you want. You can cut bits off. You can stick bits on. I don't mind. But what I will not stand by and watch is children being exposed to the notion that because as Hilary Cass says, choosing to define as the opposite gender is not, it leads to, it obviously leads, it can lead to enormous damage. Hormone replacement, puberty blockers, irreparable damage, sterilisation for children. And, one does not want to let children have that sort of, or have adults have that sort of persuasion over young people.
You mentioned the Supreme Court ruling. What beggars belief for me, it's unbelievable that a change in the law seems to change people's opinions about something that was so obviously, to me anyway, completely mad. It's that Orwellian, you belong to the party if you are willing to tell yourself 2 + 2 = 5. What does it say about, again, our fellow professionals who bought into this? What's the expression? Hook, line and sinker, is that the expression? Until someone in the Supreme Court says otherwise. And then what about the next time some judge says something that maybe is mad? Everyone just goes along with that then?
Well, one has to assume that the judges are
well, not in
reasonable.
Australia. Not in Australia, where they lost. The same decision went the other way in Australia.
I think that actually outside a public sphere, people do think, this is madness. I mean, the board at BBC Children in Need is a great board. It's made up of very, very clever, very nice, educated, well-meaning people. They give up their time free of charge. Half the board is BBC executives and half the board are people from outside the BBC who've got expertise in the law or tax or charities or whatever. But they're all very committed to doing the right thing. And I said to them all, would you send your child, would you be happy sending your child, if your child was at primary school, to a school that signed up to this LGBT Youth Charter? And all of them sort of went, well, actually, no. But on the face of it, they were so terrified of being seen to upset the trans lobby, which is very, very powerful. The BBC sort of desperate not to be seen to be ruffling those feathers. That it didn't have the courage to say, we are stopping this funding, even though they knew it was wrong. And they said, let's quickly finish the grant, because we had, X £1,000 worth. In total, the BBC Children in Need gave LGBT Youth Scotland £466,000 over a span of about 12 years. So nearly £500,000. This is money from people doing, cake sales for Pudsey or sponsored skips or whatever. The board said, well, let's just quietly kind of just finish the grant and then we won't have been seen to have stopped it. And I just said, no, we have to stand up. We have to stand up for children. We are called BBC Children in Need. And, LGBT Youth Scotland runs a series of youth clubs, and young people who might be sort of, confused about their sexuality or wanting to express their sexuality in a way they feel unable to at home might go to. One young man went to this youth club when he was about 15, and essentially he was groomed by adult people. He was taken to a nightclub in Glasgow where he was raped by adult men. And this was under the aegis of a children's charity funded by BBC Children in Need.
Christ.
So you have to sort of, and the chief executive, who earns pretty much the amount that the Prime Minister earns, was so worried about his own safety. He said, I need safety cameras, I'm worried about death threats, etc., that he was willing to carry on the funding because he was worried about his own skin. He wasn't worried about confused and abused children in Scotland.
You ever Googled your own name or email address? I did the other day, and it was pretty disturbing. Pages and pages of personal info just out there. Phone numbers, past addresses, even stuff I don't remember signing up for. That's where today's sponsor, Aura, comes in. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your number or why you're drowning in spam, it's data brokers. These companies collect your info without your consent and sell it to marketers and scammers. even stalkers. And sure, you can get them to remove your info, but they make it purposely complicated. Aura does all of that for you. That's why I use it myself and recommend it to friends and family. It's like locking every door and window. You get alerts if your info is on the dark web, real-time fraud notifications, a VPN antivirus, password manager, and 24/7 support with $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's one app that covers everything. Go to aura.com/heretics to try Aura free for 14 days and see what data of yours is out there. It just seems a bit pathetic, really, because there aren't many. I don't want to sort of encourage them by saying, there aren't many sort of attacks from the LGBT community. I don't think it's the same as maybe speaking out about Islam. Your reputation will be ruined. That's what you might be in fear of, and that's what a lot of people are in fear of. And of course, you can get attacked by anyone if you speak out about them, but then you never speak about anything.
Well, I think J.K. Rowling has had death threats. She's had bricks through her window.
Well, she's so prominent.
She has had a lot of stick, but she's a brave woman. She is remarkable.
Yeah, she is.
And I was very happy when she started following me on Twitter. I thought my work is done.
I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for that moment still. If she ever were to, I wouldn't tweet it. Because I always think she might think, because every time she follows someone, I don't know if you did this or not, but people, they retweet and they go, look, JK's followed me. Did you do that?
I didn't take a screenshot of it. I may have mentioned it on a media platform.
So every time she does it, it's like she's making a political, but because people are going to retweet and say something, and I think I'd love for her to follow me. And if she's watching this, she must watch something, right? She must watch the things the way us normal people do. And so maybe she's watching this.
I think she's amazing.
Oh, so do I. I've read, I was a Harry Potter obsessive as well.
Oh, well,
so,
it's great.
Yeah, loved all that. So are there, actually, you know what? Take me to just how you felt the moment that you actually realised, shit, like we're involved in this charity. Like, how did that feel for you?
It felt like the worst possible thing that a chair of a beloved children's charity could feel, where you see that your charity is funding a place that harboured a paedophile.
God.
That it was, I couldn't actually believe it. It was, and I immediately I was on a train. When I got off the train, I immediately rang the chief executive, and he said, look, I'm at a Bruce Springsteen concert in Ireland. This is, I can't really focus on this now. I said, are you mad? Do you realise what this is? This is potential existential ruin for BBC Children in Need. I mean, let alone about the damage that is being done to small children, young people in Scotland. Look at, this is a beloved charity which has been associated, which the BBC founded over 100 years ago. It was founded when the BBC was founded. It was called Children in Need of Help, and it was a radio charity and very low key. And then Terry Wogan invented or devised the telethon about 45 years ago. So in modern terms, it's been going for about 45 years. Raises about £55 million a year. It's not going to change the dial. It's not going to end child poverty. It doesn't operate in schools really. It doesn't operate in hospitals really. But what it does do is bring happiness and joy and just levity to children's lives all over the country in probably quite a small way, but a significant way. And I think that's worth sort of getting out of bed for. But to see, the whole legacy and future of children in need threatened by this association was just awful. And what was so astonishing is that the whole board couldn't see that. They were too frightened. They were cowardly. And this all started off in May, dragged on through June, July, August. everyone's away. I was in Italy. I'd gone to stay with a friend of mine who was dying of pancreatic cancer. He has since died. He was a great journalist. He was a Daily Mail real hack. And he said to me, "This is a great story. You should leak it." He knew it was a cracking story, and but sadly he never was around to see it become a story. But I was down in the south of Italy with him, where he'd rented a house, and my husband and I went down to sort of be with him. Every day I was having to. There was no internet in the house. I was having to leave the house, travel 2 miles up the road to a hotel where I could have a Zoom call with the whole board of BBC Children in Need. It was just, and they were like, "Oh, well, no, we can't stop this funding. So we've got to have a report. We've got to investigate it a bit more." So that took 3 months, for the report. And then a report came back. And of course, the executives from BBC Children in Need had gone to Glasgow to the headquarters of LGBT Youth Scotland, where they'd found sparkling windows and smiling people and a nice receptionist with pens on the table. Obviously everything looked brilliant. It was like an Ofsted visit, And they came back and said, "Oh, nothing to see here." And I said, "What about that? What about that young man who has historic accusations of child abuse?"
James Rennie.
No. The child. I think it's called Sam Cowie. Who was taken to a nightclub and assaulted, raped, and they said, "Oh, he's always had it in for them." This is an executive of BBC Children in Need saying that about a boy who was raped.
It's the ideology, isn't it?
Taking the adult's position. I mean, it's just beggars belief.
Do children in need? Do they give to other LGBT kind
Yes, they do. I immediately ordered a report because it was quite clear that the chief executive, didn't have a handle on who was what the charity was funding, what actually his day job was. Didn't have a handle on it.
And as the chair, that wasn't your permit, or is that the word?
Purview. Well, I felt I should have known about it, but I did this as a voluntary role. It wasn't my day. This was his day job, which he's been paid many, many thousands of pounds to do. And
he didn't seem to be aware.
Well, he likes doing other things, like sort of hanging out with celebrities and
Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, exactly. So I immediately ordered a review into how many other LGBT trans charities we fund. Although I don't think that actually a children's charity should fund any trans charities, particularly after the Cass report, which outlaws puberty blockers for young people after a significant scientific review.
Isn't it? It's sad though, because I suppose there are a lot of young children who might be struggling with their sexuality. So we're not talking about LGBT, we're talking about LGB.
Yeah. Well,
and now they won't get that kind of help because the T keeps showing up.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah. Anyway, we funded about 7 other trans charities, all of which seem to be, reasonably kind of harmless. So
okay.
yeah, I did check.
Bloody hell. This is.
But the thing is, Andrew, when you're talking to high net worth individuals, which as chair you have to do a lot, and you say these millionaires, please give us your money, because do you know what? If you've got a spare million or two, give it to us and we will spend it wisely, because we know where the money's going. We have committees, we have groups, we have people right across the nations and regions, and so we know that money isn't going to a shell company or some weird thing or some children's charity which employs people. Yeah. So actually, our whole status, the whole raison d'etre by which we do a lot of fundraising, which is we are the BBC, we are Pudsey Bear, we are trustworthy, was fatally undermined by the fact that we didn't know where the money was going, and the money was going to a charity which was harmful to children.
When did you first start to feel, hey, some of this trans stuff is not actually as liberal and progressive as it's being shown to be?
I think gradually. Oh, yeah, it's a good question. I think gradually over the last sort of 18 months, which is why when I read this story in the Telegraph about LGBT Youth Scotland, I read it with a jaundiced eye, and it was written with a jaundiced eye. I mean, the Telegraph, is pretty sort of, it's not likely to uphold the kind of trans charities, but it was a very critical piece. But I was sufficiently concerned to immediately see whether we funded it or not, immediately. So I think that was this time last year. So I think for about the last sort of 12 months, I'd been kind of feeling anxious about it, because the trouble is that because the trans community has protested so much about being valid, that nobody dare criticise it, which means that under its shelter can go people who do not have good feelings. Yeah. They do not have good intentions. And they can hide in plain sight, because no one dares say, well, actually, what are you doing? Because it's like, oh, you're anti-trans, oh, you're tough,
I think that's the point we want to make as well about like the toilet situation, the bathroom situation, because it's often said by that side, so to speak, oh, so you're assuming that all trans people are a problem and that all... Yeah, and it's, well, no, of course not. But all men are not. But some men,
but quite a lot are.
Those are men, unfortunately. Yeah,
they are men.
What is it? Probably 1% of men or something. But over a country of 50 million people, you don't want room.
And also, it's not necessarily about the men. It's also about the women. I mean, you probably don't know this, Andrew, but I have taken all my clothes off and changed my entire outfit several times in women's loo. And I suspect every single woman listening to this podcast will have done the same, because you're in a place, women's outfits, women's clothes are not like, they don't go from day to night in a seamless way like men's do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've taken all my clothes off in the back of a cab and changed everything, So if you're taking all your clothes off in the loo, you don't really want some bloke, even though he may also be in a dress, prowling around in the loos. You just don't.
But yeah, I think that, the reason I asked that is because I'm just interested in the psychology of it. Like all of us at first, even if, I don't know when you first heard about trans, it was like, it seems all right.
Yeah.
And all of us had a moment where we went, oh,
yeah,
hang on, this isn't right.
Yeah.
So,
and also it was a sort of, I honestly think we'll look back, maybe in 10 years' time and think, what was this madness that we were encouraging young people to alter their hormones, to block the puberty, to be sterile? I mean, it's a terrible fate.
It is.
And
it is.
The sort of decisions you make when you're 14 bear no relation to your mind when you're 24.
Can you imagine?
I know.
I pierced my ear. I was 13. And annoyingly, because usually it closes up and mine never did. So you can still see a hole in the ear, which gives off an impression that me as a 36-year-old man it is not a real problem, but that's not who I am. Luckily, it's a tiny little dot in my ear.
Yeah.
That I did to annoy my parents.
Yeah, of course. No one's going to notice it. But imagine if you had a tattoo on your face or something.
There was a thing going around. There was a survey of people who said that these were progressives, and would you let your kid get a tattoo? No. Would you let them go on puberty blockers or change it? Yes. It was bonkers. I remember I called my mum and said, "Would you ever allow me or mind if I got a pierced ear?" And I'd already done it. And she went, "You are not doing that. Absolutely no way." And I was sitting there with this pierced ear, looking at myself in the mirror going, shit, I can't go home. But I think there was some sort of arrangement with my parents as to, if I went to the grandparents, that had to be out. It's so mad to think of that. That was only 23 years ago. And the grandparents can't see the pierced ear. Whereas nowadays, kids, well, I sound like I'm getting older or whatever it is, What about... You have to deal when you're working at the BBC or at Children in Need, and it's sort of the same. It's the BBC's Children in Need, isn't it? is it difficult, sort of, not just the people who are scared of being, oh no, we did the wrong thing, but there must be a lot of younger, I suppose, employees who might now think you're a bigot or something.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Yeah. I got it from the chief executive.
Oh, so the guy, oh right, go on.
Because as chair, you don't hang out that, I mean, I would get, in fact, during COVID, we did a lot of kind of quizzes online, on Zoom and whatnot. So actually I got to know the staff quite well. There's it employs about 100 people and it's up in Salford in Manchester.
Oh, right, yeah.
And, I think the chief executive, who is my age, would say to me, this won't go down well with the troops, sort of thing. This decision will go down very badly because a lot of young people work for BBC Children Need. I don't care. That's his problem. That's what he's paid £150,000 and drives a Range Rover for. It's really not my problem. And, so that I just dismissed that. And also, he also tried as did LGBT Youth Scotland, when we withdrew the grant temporarily while this report was being made. They wrote this letter. I mean, they're not stupid. They wrote a very good letter saying what you're doing is wrong and we won't be able to have this texting service for young people who are concerned about their sexuality and therefore they're all going to commit suicide. Oh, this is such an old sore. It's like if you don't allow puberty blockers to ruin children's lives and sterilize them, they'll commit suicide.
Yeah.
Zero proof of that. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. But the chief executive, it was one of his lines that he parroted to me many times, like, children across Scotland will be committing suicide. No, they won't.
It's also psychologically, we've known for a long time. That's one of the most horrible kinds of blackmail that people can do. The old trope of the husband saying, if you leave me, I'll take my own life.
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah.
I hate that. But it's not backed up by any stats, is it?
None. It's cowardice.
Well, it sounds like you were going full throttle into this, but were there surprises when you sort of came out publicly saying, hey, in terms not just of attack, but people saying, come over to our side?
It overwhelmed my life. It overwhelmed the life of my husband, my ex-husband, my 4 children. I could not think or do anything else other than focus on LGBT Youth Scotland and why we were funding them. And I got onto all sorts of chat groups from horrified parents across Scotland who've been anxious and agitating about, because the Scottish government funds LGBT Youth Scotland to the tune of about £2 million a year. So this was just kind of overwhelming and all-encompassing my head, and still the board would not move, would not finish the grant. And
your family must have been on board. Sorry, your family must have been on board, though.
Yeah, they were.
Regarding the Scotland, this particular LGBTYS.
Yeah, they were. And so in the end, I had to speak to the papers. And I spoke to the Times. Janice Turner wrote a very, very measured, very good piece about it. The world didn't stop turning. Nobody had a death threat. Nothing terrible happened. And the story wasn't picked up by anyone. And, but the fear of media coverage, ironically, because I'd said we must remove the money because of the anxiety of media coverage. The fear of media coverage, because I told everyone that this was going to appear in the newspaper that day. I said it was going to appear in the paper the next day. The day before, we pulled the money because they were so worried about press coverage. That was more important than the abuse and the pain and peril of children. So figure that out. And then that was at the end of August, beginning of September. Next board meeting was October. In October, I turned up to chair the meeting. And was basically thrown under a bus for speaking to the papers. So they said, why the board's like, well, you've spoken to the papers and we still want you to carry on chairing the board, but actually you must now sign on a dotted line never to speak to a newspaper again. And I just said, well, so I resigned because the board clearly didn't have any faith in me. And then it did go into the press. And I wrote a very angry resignation letter, which then found its way into the papers. And then it was a big story. And then there was reputational damage for BBC Children in Need, which could have all been avoided.
It's so stupid sometimes, people. And what about the sort of reaction on the other side? Where
Oh yeah, you asked this. Yes. Well, I was very, very worried about this. I wasn't worried about my personal safety. I think I was worried that I would be sort of howled down for being kind of old-fashioned and prudish and not thoughtful and bigoted and to my amazement and delight, I was saluted by people who understood that what I was doing was sticking up for children, really girls and young women, in the sort of schools thing, but also all children who have been brainwashed, I think.
Feels like maybe if you'd done this 5 years earlier, you might have had more pushback and more anger and you'd have been out. Because I feel like we're getting past it a little bit.
I think we are.
Yeah.
I really think we are. I think the tide is turning. And I think that actually the media and certain areas of the arts, far from being at the vanguard, are the kind of last to catch up.
Isn't that funny?
Which I think is
David Tennant. I bet he supports LGBTYS.
I think I wouldn't know, but I'm sure he probably does.
Scottish actor.
I know.
He loves that.
Yeah. I mean, or anyone who says a woman can have a penis. Which, I mean, LGBT Youth Scotland actually put out a thing saying, talking about lesbian kind of get-togethers and saying, advising young people, young women, take contraception with you because some lesbians might have a penis.
No, don't. I can't.
This is going into schools.
It's ridiculous. You know what though?
It's just absolute mad.
There's an element of my own, and I bet, I'm only saying this because I bet a lot of viewers are going through this as well. There's an element of my own psychology of which I'm not necessarily proud, which is that although for years since speaking out about trans and how I think it's not liberal but illiberal, I've been banned from bookshops and certain things, banned from speaking events, all these kinds of things. It was horrible when it happened.
You've been deplatformed.
Oh yeah, from many different places that would have been wonderful to speak at, such as the Tate Museum. I was going to speak about a book I wrote and that was cancelled because of what I've said about trans. And that's really upsetting. It was really upsetting at the time. But now that, as you say, I think the world's caught up, there's a tiny part of me that's a bit like, misses being the rebel because it's no longer so rebellious.
Well,
to say
I know.
this.
I mean, I said to my husband this morning, I'm going on the Heretics podcast, and he said, "Well, actually, this is not heresy. This is now become kind of straightforward truth."
I should call it common sense, but I think that's Jerry Barton's podcast, and the footballer guy, and who's been in some controversies himself, obviously.
I mean, seeing the government in their sort of writhing, trying to kind of like commend the Supreme Court's judgment and trying to forget that the actual Prime Minister said it is not all women have cervixes. I mean, he's a sensible man. He's a barrister. I mean,
He's a man of the law. Whatever the law says, and if the law's ambiguous, as it may have been, and it's now a bit better clarified, then he's going to be ambiguous. He just seems to, whatever the law is, it scares me that.
No, I think it's whatever the sort of vogue is. I mean, I just think it's just, it's absolutely, you want a leader to have leadership. And that, I felt as chair of the BBC's Children in Need, I had to show leadership, even if it meant going against the whole board and the executive, and even if it meant effectively resigning. And it was a real shame because I was very, very fond of the board. I appointed them all and I valued and respected them all. And they just proved to be complete cowards.
It's a story that you've heard before. Rosie Kay is an example of that.
I know.
So
I'm seeing her tomorrow. I'm seeing her in next Tuesday.
Oh, send her my love. And similar. I think she made the board of her dance.
Her own named dance company that she then had to leave.
It's just
the Rosie Kay Dance Company.
I wonder if there something about the ideological pursuit in charities that maybe attracts those kinds of people who get caught up in these fashions. I'm thinking of Oxfam. Was it Oxfam? They did there's like a whole thing of the pronouns you have to use. Meanwhile, they were off doing all sorts of sexual assaults and bullying.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, I mean, it was Oxfam in Haiti, I think, or you know. I think also it's a bit like the sort of Gregg Wallace thing. Yeah, he didn't like being told off by women of a certain age and a certain class. And the fact of the matter is that women of my age and educational background are now in positions of control and power, whether it's Rosie Kay or me or J.K. Rowling. And we are sufficiently confident enough to stand up for what we believe in. And I think that is, I think certain people don't like that. They find that threatening.
There's a certain kind of male feminist that I think is that way. That they sort of appear as though they're on the feminist side and then don't actually let women speak. And if the woman does speak to them, suddenly they kick off.
David Tennant is a good example of that.
We wanted Kemi to disappear.
Yeah. I mean, that is just, democratically elected and an elected leader of a party, of the opposition. And he has the temerity to say that. And I don't think you'd say that about a man.
I think a lot of people are concerned that often it's the case, especially with the actors, most of their kids seem to be trans. And maybe most is an exaggeration, but certainly compared to the wider...
Robert De Niro.
Tennant and the Sex and the City woman, and there's so many. Cynthia Nixon, and I think with David Tennant, people think it might be once your kids are that way or believe that, it's very hard to push back.
I know, and I feel very sorry for parents who have that to contend with, and I wonder why it's happened. I wonder why the statistics seem to show that so many young people are questioning their sexuality in this way. And I think it is a thing, I think it's something which has been sort of whipped up and sort of foisted upon young people as in a sort of fashion, really. I mean, I cannot believe that, thousands and thousands of young people are sufficiently distressed or unhappy with their own sex, their birth sex, that they are going to have puberty blockers and operations to cosmetically reverse it.
Well, it's we've long known just about the psychology of girls in particular, but also boys, but mostly I think girls in their teenage years not wanting to become women because of the way men start to stare at them.
Many girls who wish to transition have come from a household where there has been sex abuse or some sort of sexual aggression.
You know, I've got the ones I've really lost respect for is Have I Got News for You? So that's still BBC, of course. And I just can't believe it. And Ian
They
Hislop,
haven't touched it.
Ian Hislop claims he did and that he didn't make the cut, which is like last week or something, a couple of
They
weeks
haven't
ago.
touched the Supreme Court ruling.
He said he did and they didn't include it in the cut, which is even worse. He should be quite in control.
Try
of
listening
this.
to Woman's Hour, Andrew.
I haven't done. Go on.
Well, I mean, they do not. They might have trans activists on, or they'll have men on who are purporting to be women.
But and another is the sort of the football ones, the Gary Lineker and all that. He's on every progressive march or whatever, but doesn't want to defend women's spaces or women's teams and things. This is all BBC.
Yeah, I mean, I think sport. I salute Sebastian Coe because he is. I mean, I run marathons and I really take great pleasure my advanced years to see where I am in the female,
Right.
in the field.
You've done 12, haven't you?
Yeah,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Thank you.
But yeah.
I'm not gonna rate myself against men. And imagine if you're an elite runner, and you ran a 2 hour. Well, just the other day, the London Marathon, the world record was smashed by a woman, and I think it was 2:15 or 2:14.
Was it hours? 2 hours, 15 minutes?
Yeah. Well, the male, that would be pretty sluggish for an elite man. The men are posting 2:02, 2:03. Obviously the great push is on to have the sub-2 marathon, but that won't be won by a woman. It'll be won by a man, obviously. Now imagine if you are. I mean, we've seen this sort of heartbreak of women de-podiumed because some bloke has said, "Well, I'm identifying as a woman and I must be in your swim team." Or just.
So I mean, Gary Lineker. I don't know if you heard him the other day because he doesn't want to answer those kinds of questions. And then he said he thinks. Because he says a lot of people don't want to pay the license fee for the BBC, which is a subject of contention. I think some people feel, I mean, the BBC obviously offers a lot of great content. Some people feel, well, I shouldn't be forced to have to pay this, and maybe there should be some. And that's a different an argument for another day. But he started saying, we should start trying to appeal to those who do love the BBC rather than those who complain about it. And I just thought, well, yeah, but those who complain about it are made to pay, so you need to bring them on board. There just seems to be an arrogance at the BBC, particularly with this progressive ideology. Did you feel that around you?
No, I felt that the board were kind of like uneasy that this sort of politics had entered the terrain of BBC Children in Need, which they like being on the board, but they don't really want any trouble. And so actually just to quickly pay the grant and be quiet was just easier.
Well, given the nature of the crimes of James Rennie and the historic crimes at LGBTYS, is there a feeling that, because the last couple of years we had the last 10 years, I suppose, Jimmy Savile stuff all came out and it was like, okay, this is a new dawn, a new beginning. Does it show that some people, because I mean, I don't believe anybody supported Savile, but it was a case of just keep it, let's just keep going. Have they not learned lessons?
No, they haven't, but it appears not. I mean, Hugh Edwards also.
Yeah.
His crimes, not just the young man who spoke to the Sun, but the worse. Well, I don't know how you can say it's worse, but the
also
shocking crimes of processing and making pornographic images of children. Edwards was given a pay rise and helmed the whole Queen's funeral.
What an embarrassment. I mean,
and I think the BBC, it tends to just wish things away. And when I resigned, Tim Davie asked me to come in. And I liked him. I know him quite well. I think he has a tough job being DG of the BBC. I mean, I was a correspondent for 10 years, and my boss was Tony Hall, who was the head of news. Right. And he then went to become Director General. And I've got a lot of time for Lord Hall. I think he's terrific. Anyway, Tim Davies is a DG, and he calls me in. He said, "Can we persuade you to stay?" And I said, "No, I'm not staying." And he was very nice. And he said, "You know, we've got a resignation letter for you." And it was almost like Rosie's going to go and spend more time with her family. It was just dreadful. I said, "Well, this is not true. I mean, this is not, I mean, it's just no,
This is the thick of it.
And I said, "Where is this?" I said to the press office, I said, where is this resignation letter going, supposed resignation letter going? And they said, "Oh, it's going to go to," and they named kind of like 2 or 3 sort of like Charities UK sort of tiny newsletters, which are sort of, and I just thought, this is just, no.
So again, just trying to sort of just throw a blanket over it and pretend.
Yeah.
And like transparency never hurts any. Just say what happened. We're really sorry. That didn't mean. Let's get on with it. Instead of every time they try and delay.
But the point is the reason why I went public about it is because governance of these charities is really important, and people have to know that if they're giving money to a children's charity or any charity, you know, cancer research or Battersea Dogs Home or whatever, that the money is the money is spent wisely and properly, and actually spent on fulfilling the direction of the charity. It must do that. It has to uphold what you do with the money, has to uphold the nature of the charity. And I felt that was not happening, had never happened with this particular charity.
Do you think there are people hiding behind being charitable? I mean, obviously Jimmy Savile again is the key example there. Like, people don't investigate you. If you're giving enough money, the charities then what? They're like, "Oh yeah, we need this," and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult. I mean, do you accept money from someone who's made all their millions from producing cigarettes or something you don't particularly believe in? I think that is very difficult. But what I'm talking about is if you're in charge of an agency that funds other charities, if you're in charge of fundraising and bringing in money from people who believe that you have the integrity and authority to do so, or do you have the integrity and do you have the authority? In other words, do you know where your money is going and what it's being spent on?
Will things change?
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, people love Pudsey and they love BBC Children in Need for quite right reasons. And I just hope that the executive is more connected to what the actual charity is doing. And I also hope that the welfare and safety and health of children is uppermost in every single penny that is spent by BBC Children in Need, because it hasn't been.
Have you given consideration to what you'll do, what you want to do?
Yeah, I have. I looked at my diary and I realised that I'd spent so much time wrestling with this issue that now that I've stepped down from the charity, I've got loads of time. So I've signed up to go back to university, and I'm doing a French degree at London University.
I love that.
Starting in September.
You need that. You need, after all this, you definitely need that.
I know. I'm going to spend some time with some French films and study the history of General de Gaulle.
Oh, that's nice. You have to sort of convince yourself that Nouvelle Vague cinema is not boring.
Yes.
I remember when I was 18, I had the energy for it.
Oh, it isn't boring. It's wonderful.
I'd go to the BFI and sit there.
Dieu créa la femme, un homme et une femme, un bout de souffle. It's wonderful.
That one, yes, and Les 400 coups.
Oh, Les 400 coups. It's a wonderful
just a
film.
sort of
Not
black
boring.
and white kid running for a...
No. It's. I mean, he was a child in need, that poor boy.
Yeah, he was just running. I just remember him always running, and I was sort of saying to myself, "You're enjoying this. You're a very clever 18-year-old or 21 or 22, or whatever I was." And then I got old. Now I'm just like, "Is this? I just watch reality TV.
No,
My brain is going to sludge now.
Oh, Andrew, please.
It's, you know what? It's when you're doing, it's because this is intellectual, isn't it? And you just have nothing left after. So you go home and it's like, put the football on or put some reality on.
Yeah, but you could listen to some Jacques Brel or you could listen to Charles Trenet.
Jacques Brel. I don't know Charles Trenet.
Oh, he sings. I think he sang La Mer.
Oh, okay. What, Beyond the Sea?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. You had a few years ago. You had a brain tumor removed.
I did.
How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Yeah. I mean, weirdly, it was when I just started chairing BBC Children. Well, I've been there for about a year, and it helped me kind of when I was recovering, just the kind of rigor and the sort of, the routine of board meetings and papers and all that kind of stuff. It was good to get back to. No, I'm fine. I mean, what do I say about it? I was very, very lucky. It was a benign brain tumor. It wasn't actually in my brain. It was kind of on it. It was just, there's quite a lot of space in your skull, weirdly. This thing had been hanging out there for a long time.
You're kidding.
Probably about 30 years.
What?
Growing very slowly.
And you became aware of it only a few years ago?
Yeah, I had this sort of tinnitus in one ear. And I went to the doctor and they said, it's nothing. And I said, after about 6 months, I said, look, I want to have a brain scan because I think
thank God you pushed.
Brain tumor. Yeah. And they went, highly unlikely, but okay. So I went and had this MRI scan and they said, come in immediately afterwards. So like the GP rang, I thought, oh God. So I went in and I thought, before I went in, I thought, what could be the worst? What could be the worst news? And it's a sobering moment when you think, I'm about to hear something very, very serious. I know I am. What could be the worst? And I thought, well, early onset Alzheimer's would be actually dreadful. It would be unthinkable and awful.
I think I'd have that over brain tumour, Well, both are terrible. There's not, they're both terrible.
Well, anyway, I went in. He said, actually, we have found something in there. We found a very big brain tumour. And I kind of the room started going round and round. And he said, but the great thing is it's benign.
Okay.
And the other thing is you live in central London. You will be dealt with at Queen Square, which is the National Neurological Hospital. And it's part of UCH. It's a global leader and it is remarkable. And they whip these guys out every Friday, apparently. They have a sort of brain tumour day, this particular sort, because it's not vanishingly rare.
Okay.
But it is benign. It's not like a blastoma, if you know what that is. It's not of the sort that many people are defeated by it, which is actually in the brain and is destroys connections and areas within the brain. This was just sitting on it and just sort of pushing it down. But obviously, it did have the potential to interact with the architecture of your brain and your visual and optic nerve and various veins and things. So I thought, well, probably better to be taken out. And so they took it out.
Wow. Bloody hell.
So
you're right about the inside, because that's what Davina McCall had. It was right inside her brain.
I don't know.
I got the impression, I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, I think it wasn't the same as mine, but I think she has made a full recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I'm very pleased that both of you have done.
Yeah. It was. It was not. It was a bad moment.
There.
Yeah.
I bet it makes you sort of.
Bad.
Maybe it made you more robust, though. Like I gather you were already. I imagine you were already robust, but
Well. Funnily enough, when they took off the top of my skull, and afterwards, and I wasn't awake or anything. I know some people, you can do that when you're awake, but I wasn't. Anyway, the surgeon, who I obviously fell in love with, because, that's what you do with he was just lovely. There were two surgeons, a woman who was in charge, but this man who was the person I dealt with sort of on the ward. And he said, when we looked at your brain, we could tell you were a runner.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, that must be a good thing,
It's
hopefully.
a good thing. Yeah. Because it was just very, very healthy, loads of sort of blood going to it and sort of like, in good. So listeners, viewers, get running. I mean, it really is very, very good for your brain.
I'm the worst. I'm the worst. I never do anything. The only way is I need to play tennis because I need a ball and a racket to distract me from the horrible thing of running. I couldn't do what you do. I couldn't do 2 hours of just... No way.
You have to, But the thing is, you're only 36. I started my first marathon when I was 40. 42.
We'll see.
So, you've got you've got years.
To get into running.
Yeah.
Or just more tennis.
Yeah, or paddle.
Bit of paddle. I've got one more question, but where can people sort of follow you on the socials and things like that?
Oh, well, if you're interested in arts and in kind of, if you are at a dinner party and someone says to you, well, what do you think about blah? Or what do you think about, I don't know, Tate or kind of like, or the National Theatre or something, or the Arts Council, whatever. If you've read the art stack, you'll have kind of some good stuff to say, because I write this every week, and it's a sort of opinionated column about the art world. And then sometimes I review things like Tom Hiddleston taking his shirt off in Much Ado About Nothing. That was thrilling.
Yeah.
Went to see it with my son, who's a massive Loki fan, as am I. So that's
the
great.
superhero that Tom Hiddleston plays.
In the Marvel films.
Okay.
I've seen all the Marvel films.
Have you? You're into your Marvel?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I love. Well, I went with him, and he's. We used to go to every first night.
I see. I can't enjoy them only because it feels like that they have to win. And they always sort of win, and they can do anything. It's like they're about to get killed, so then they just like pick up a tower.
Yeah.
So I need if I was going to have superheroes.
You need Jeopardy.
I need. But apparently, same thing with James Bond. But apparently, I don't want to spoil it. I don't really watch it, but apparently he did die in one of them. So, which makes it better.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like, okay, well, it looks like he's doomed this time. Oh no, he survived. Okay, so that's the art stack.
So the art stack, and it's very readable. I mean, I'm a good writer, and it doesn't go on for hours, and it's got lots of pictures, and therefore and I do this thing called 5 of the best.
Okay.
So 5 of the best at the National Gallery, or 5 of the best at Uffizi. So if you go to these enormous collections, and you think, oh my God, what do I don't know what to look at. Check out the art stack, because I've done 5 of the best of the Prado. I've done the National Portrait Gallery. I've done the Frick collection. So it's just these are the 5 paintings and sculpture. The Louvre is one I've done that you should hone in on, and they've got to include, in my 5 of the best, they have to include a world famous image. Because you don't want to go and see stuff which is obscure. You want to go and see stuff that everyone knows.
Just a black painting at the Tate in Cornwall.
Yeah.
I saw that. And I was like, everyone was just queuing up going, oh, well, this is just a black nothing.
Yeah, it's quite famous, that one. But
yeah. Everyone told me.
A, it has to be something that's globally famous. And B, there has to be a painting in my 5 of the best, which summarises the spirit of the host nation. So
okay, that's really interesting. Helpful for people like me who are sort of novices who might dabble and go, oh, I wonder what is on the art stack about this. That's brilliant. Then that's what I'll put a link to that.
Thank you. It's on Substack.
Okay, Substack, art stack. I'll put it. That's why it's stack makes sense.
Yeah,
I'll put that. Yeah, people go and check that out. And tell me who's a heretic you admire.
Heretic I admire is Madonna.
Oh, go on.
Love her. I'm just a bit younger than her, but not that much younger than her. And so she was ahead of me, kind of like forging her way. She made it okay to be sexy and smart. In the days gone by, you could either be sexy and ditzy, or smart and frumpy. And Madonna did both. And she's ruled her life, and she's ruled her destiny. And she doesn't still now. Yes, she's had plastic surgery. Who cares? If she wants to have it, she'll do it. And she promotes women. She promotes women on her labels. She supports women. And she's an all-round badass, cool heretic, and I love her.
You know what's a good song? That song Frozen. Do you know that?
No?
Ooh, ooh, da, 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 da. You know that song?
Probably.
Yeah, maybe I'll play it to you later.
Okay.
Everyone listen to Frozen by Madonna. Like a Prayer's good, isn't it?
Like a Prayer's great.
I don't like a Virgin. It's not my kind of music.
Oh, I love Like a Virgin.
It's
That's
too
the first
bouncy.
one.
Yeah.
But that was...
Well, it was because for you it's chronological. For me, I was born too late. It was all just these are Madonna's songs.
I went to a Madonna convention for the Saturday Times. It was absolutely hilarious. It was where she was born, and in Detroit. And we went to it was held at the nightclub where she kind of went when she was a young person. And there was a woman there who went into the loos and sat on every single loo seat in the place, so that she could have sat on a loo seat that perhaps Madonna might have once sat on. I know, madness.
This is why we have to be careful about who we let into bathrooms, I think.
Absolutely.
People, please go and check out the art stack. Sounds absolutely wonderful. I'm going to have a little link down below. Hit the like and subscribe to this channel and keep watching it.